the QA aspects become more and more important. They are an integral part of it.
Being able to do parallel release testings, their automation is very helpful.
You must make decisions very quickly. So these typical classical quality procedures, you don't have time to wait. You cannot place your product in quarantine and say, oh, let's meet in 2 weeks and decide what to do with that.
Good afternoon and welcome to this latest episode in Miltenyi Biotec's ongoing videocast series, All Things CGT. My name is James Havseth. I'll be your co-host today. I work in the Marketing and Communications Department for Miltenyi Biotec. I was a chemist many years ago by training, not a biologist, which is why I'm very ably supported by my colleague Silvio.
Yeah, welcome all. My name is Silvio. I'm a biochemist by training, working in the immunotherapy field now for 8 years, and I'm heading a group which conducts process development.
And our guests today are Christin Tischner, the Senior Project Manager in the CAR-T International Market Development Division at Miltenyi Biotec. Been in CGT manufacturing and biopharma for around 10 years and with biomedicine itself since it set up in 2019.
Yeah, correct.
And Vicente Godoy is also joining us, Director of Global Quality at Miltenyi Biomedicine, which covers all the GPs, GCP, VP, DP, and MP, oversight and compliance, and a host of other things, I imagine, as well. But welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Hi.
Shall we dive right into some of our questions here, because we think you will have some very unique perspectives on this. We start with looking at process harmonization. Yeah. Where do you see, let's start with you, Christin, where do you see the biggest opportunities to streamline processes, and can that improve the availability of cell and gene therapies worldwide?
Yeah, so I think at the moment, the traditional way of distributing cell and gene therapy is still from a local or central manufacturing perspective, which is because it's in most cases a frozen product, and so it is able to reach the whole world, so to say, so for global distribution. However, the access is not equally distributed yet because probably the affordability is one topic, and that's why, streamlining the processes, make it easier to transfer and also reduce costs is very crucial there, because CAR-T products, when they are centrally manufactured in the EU, in the US, have a certain price tag, and this is often a hurdle for global distribution. So, because human resources, costs connected with infrastructure are a significant part of the total price. So, moving the manufacturing where the patients need to be treated can help there.
Oh, no. Christine, very interesting topic. During the last episode, we already touched on that with a focus or the lens of manufacturing and QC. But I think supply chain is far more. So do you have any other parts of the supply chain that benefit from this more decentralized approach? Can you maybe make this a little bit more concrete? I think it's very interesting for our audience.
So in theory, of course, as closer you move to the patient, it does not need to be in the hospital per se, but also more locally in the country at least. The more you can shorten the time of supply chain or of the distribution, so vein-to-vein time can be decreased, but also the costs of transportation might not be so high. But what is also interesting there is important there then is that you have a whole infrastructure, a whole ecosystem to orchestrate that all, to really also include the supply chain into the process of manufacturing, the patient allocation, the slot allocation, and have this all integrated, because in the end it is very important still, even though you don't need to cross borders, but the chain of identity is really crucial in this kind of therapy. So that's why you need to track that all very carefully. So supply chain still a very important topic.
Do you think that's something that will also help with compliance streamlining? Because I imagine everyone who works in this industry, while we all see the importance of compliance, would like to find some way to speed those processes up to get these medicines out to, or these treatments out to the patients.
Well, you're talking about having point of care instead of such. Not necessarily, because when you talk about centralized manufacturing, so this is all taking place in the manufacturing sites, in the cell factory. So they are well equipped. They have high level of quality standards. And when you move to decentralized manufacturing, so basically you make a tech transfer, and then all these institutions, clinics and hospitals will be manufacturing a product. Whether they do have all the structure they need, this high standard of quality, this is not certain. So actually, for the license holder in this case, in the commercial phase, you could have basically quickly 1,000 institutions manufacturing your product, but it's your product. So you are still responsible for oversight. Keeping oversight of all of these institutions is not an easy task.
I agree. Yeah, maybe we take a step back, and I mean, we are already discussing decentralized, which is a kind of, I would say, more advanced setting for cell and gene therapy. But even if you compare traditional medicines, right, like small molecules, biologicals, and you look at it from an QA perspective, Vicente, or from a supply chain perspective, Christine, so are there any very unique factors which are very new, I would say, to this game that you would like to share, and maybe also how you tackled them here over the last years to make sure that we can bring these patients to the medicine in time? Who wants to start? Maybe Vicente. Is it okay?
Yes, I mean, compared to traditional medicines, CGTs, they add a lot of complexity to quality procedures. Because, for example, when a batch is over, for traditional medicines, if something goes wrong, they just place it in quarantine, and then they take the time to investigate, find the roots, and what can they do? Can they rescue this batch or not? Yes. In our case, we don't have this time. The vein-to-vein process must be completed in 2 weeks. So when we know that a batch is being completed or manufactured, then we already have to be on standby, sometimes late at night. Just waiting, because if there's an out of specification or a deviation, you must make decisions very quickly. So these typical classical quality procedures, you don't have time to wait. You cannot place your product in quarantine and say, let's meet in 2 weeks and decide what to do with that.
Got it. So probably also quite interdisciplinary then?
Definitely. Yeah. Quality is involved more as a coordinator, but decisions can become very medical. So you need physicians, you need people from manufacturing, regulatory affairs.
Yeah, I still remember, I was talking to an SVP from a pharma company. They did cell and gene therapy. Before that, he was doing biologicals with another pharma company. And he told me during the first month, I already had more interaction with the board than I had in 10 years with my old company. Yes. So this really stick with me, because I thought, okay, that's completely resonating to that what you just mentioned. So Christine, you want to maybe add something from the supply chain?
From the supply chain perspective, it's also equally important then to have this cross-functional collaboration together to really be on time, because as soon as the product can be released, the supply chain needs to, or the clock starts ticking. And as you said, for a fresh product, we have this 2 days, or not even 2 days to deliver the product from the cell factory lab to the patient in the hospital. And as you can imagine, you have a certain radius you can reach, but even there, everything needs to run very smoothly. So the routes you planned, the flights should not be delayed or cancelled, or you always have to have a backup plan already in place, because you have no time to find solutions when the product is on its way. And of course, you also need to really make sure that nobody can interfere with it, or you need to always have an eye on it, and make sure that there will be no mix-ups, because in the end, each patient needs to receive his own cells back.
Right. So We've touched on it a couple of times now. It might be worth talking about scaling out, right? Because obviously for anything in the CG space to be universally adopted and to become a commercial success, scaling out is going to be needed both for the supply chain and I guess parallel manufacturing and QA need to be happening at the same time. What's that going to look like?
Well, the challenge is that, if you compare again with traditional medicines, you develop your process in a pilot plant, then you use a machine that maybe can make 500 pills per hour, right? So once your project is all approved and you got a market license, then you scale up your process, then you just need a bigger machine that will maybe make 50,000 pills per hour. So, and this is all one batch, and this can be used to treat thousands of patients. In our case, each batch is one treatment. So you cannot just get a bigger max and then you prepare medicine for thousands of patients. So you could maybe make your process, you optimize your process. I'm not a manufacturing specialist, but you could make it faster, sure. But you would still need one equipment per patient per treatment. You cannot mix up. It's autologous. So scaling up would be basically increasing the number of devices running in parallel so you can produce more batches because, as I said, each batch is one treatment for one patient.
I mean, essentially, we also talked about robotics and AI in the last episode, and I was wondering from a quality perspective, what do you think? What is more trustful, a robot or a human being? Because, I mean, taking out the human beings from the entire supply chain would be beneficial in terms of costs. I think we can all agree on that. But what happens if any mistakes are happening? Is that something you are already thinking of, or are we more on the basics right now?
You mean automatization of the manufacturing process, for example?
Yeah.
Well, machines are more precise. They are faster, they are more precise. So replacing humans by machines is definitely of an advantage. Also because our product is sterile. Yeah. And we humans, we are a source of contamination. If you could have a clean room running just with robots, like completely free of because the contaminations you have, all the cases of contamination in clean rooms, most of it are caused by man, by humans being present there in that room. So if you eliminated the human factor, you would be eliminating, for example, the number one cause of contamination.
All right. And would you be okay with a self-learning approach? So if you have AI, you can have these educational loops so they understand how to improve. How is that from a QA perspective? How do you see that?
Well, improvement is our goal. Like, when you talk about quality, our first focus is continuous improvement. However, when you have a process, it's validated by law. So you have to describe how it works step by step. It's submitted to the authorities, they will approve it. If you have AI behind it and they start changing the process the whole time, this means you would be constantly revalidating your process, constantly contacting authorities to ask for approval. So, I mean, it would help, but I think it should be done in a controlled way. Otherwise, you would be overwhelmed with all the validation activities and communication with authorities.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So are there comparable aspects?
So I also probably would like to add to the aspect of parallel manufacturing. So one thing is, of course, the manufacturing per se. You can add several devices in a cell factory lab and multiply the outcome. But then you also have the QC analysis, the release testings, the in control testings, release testings, which need to be done. And there, the risk of mixing up samples is also still there. So being able to do parallel release testings, there automation is very helpful and of very much advantage, because I think roboting helps a lot there to also analyze multiple samples at the same time, because the risk for human errors is also very high there. So
yeah, I mean, I think robotics, I mean, you can think in different ways, right? Many people think of the robot walking around, but of course you can have it integrated in platforms, have it in a closed way. Yeah, that would maybe also tackle additional points. We touched already on this point of, let's say, decentralized versus centralized. So if you look back again on this point from a supply chain perspective, Christine, If you would have been trained in a centralized environment and now you want to move towards a decentralized environment, could you set it up directly from scratch, or are there some unique, let's say, understandings you need to set up such a supply chain? How different is that from a centralized one?
So in theory, setting up maybe coming from the whole infrastructure. So sometimes the expectation is that when you say you go decentralized or maybe point of care really directly to a hospital, that it can lower the regulatory requirements. But at the moment where we see it now, this is not the case. So you would really have to do one-to-one duplicate more or less from the process as you have it set up in a bigger facility, and then scale it down, so to say, when you decentralize. So that's why, you really need the whole skill set you also need for operating in a bigger facility. What could be an advantage is when you embed it in the hospital infrastructure, that certain QC testings are probably already established and validated, like all the sterility testing, mycoplasma, endotoxin, they are running for other activities there as well.
Yeah, so you see synergy effects, which could really help you on the decentralized setting. So how is that on the QA? I assume that's completely different, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, once you transfer technology to a hospital, for example, and they assume manufacturing, then they will need a manufacturing license. They will be responsible for the process. So then by law, they will have to have their own QA. So in this case, when it all happens in the cell factory, our QA department, together with Biotec QA, we are responsible for GMP compliant. Mm-hmm. Once it's done in another institution, they will be responsible for that. Then we are out. So they will have to build up their own quality department and establish and implement their own quality processes.
I see. And do you think there are any chances to, say, synergize there as well? Or is it really like if you have 5 departments, you have 5 times the amount of work? Is there any way to cut?
Talking about, we should not think about the limitations, but maybe how to make it possible. Yeah. I think it's in our interest that it happens. And in this case, what we will do is maybe provide support to this hospital. Like we could share like procedures so they don't have to start from scratch. We could help them establish their own quality systems, but still they would have to do it. They would have to execute it.
And how's about digitalization? So, and how far could that help?
You mean if we could, for example, follow up their whole processes live, this would help us to keep oversight, because as I said, they might be manufacturing it, but it's your product. So by law, you are not like free of responsibility totally. So you have to keep some oversight. And as I said, we can quickly reach 1,000 institutions, manufacturing our product, for example, and digitalizing would make it much easier, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as if the field is not exciting and fast-moving enough as it is already, I want to actually take a look ahead now and see if we can ask you how you think the field, this commercial area in CGT, is going to develop over the next, say, 5 years or so. Christine, why don't we start with you?
So I think one interesting development in the CGT field is certainly the in vivo CAR development, because also talking about costs, you don't need the whole infrastructure as you needed for the in vitro CARs. So there's a lot of interest there, and I think it will also advance in the next 5 years. However, I think it is probably more for patient population, because there are still a lot of risks. Even you try to control the risk as much as possible, but manipulating within the human body is still a black box. So for indications where patients are in a very bad condition and very fast deteriorating, I think that could be a good alternative to the traditional CAR manufacturing. However, I think in indications when you think about autoimmune, for instance, where patients are probably not so severely sick and have a bit more time to receive the treatment, you don't need to accelerate the vein-to-vein time so dramatically, and then you could probably rather play it safe and go with the traditional CAR T-cell approach.
Okay. Vicente?
Well, from my perspective, I'm not a businessman, but I know that business assessments, they expect this market to grow significantly next years. From a quality perspective, what I observe currently is a huge regulatory pressure. So it's very complex, and the requests are really very difficult to comply with. We've seen, like in the last years, two big players like Takeda and Galapagos stepping out of this business. Mm-hmm. So because it's very difficult to find partners and investments. And I'm at biomedicine, we have a focus on clinical development, and we see now with a little bit concern that the FDA, for example, is planning to require comparative clinical trials. So currently, we could make single-arm studies or just compare with placebo or with other therapies. In the future, they will require comparison with other CAR Ts. So I understand that, making this comparison will make your data much more reliable. But on the other hand, this will make clinical trials unaffordable for small and mid-sized companies. And this, you might be losing a lot of capacity there. Like these little biotechs, they are the ones who usually bring also, new technology. But if they know they don't have any chance to proceed to the clinical phase, they wouldn't be able to afford it. This might break innovation, so we hope that social pressure will increase. We see what these products are capable of, the results on the patients. So we hope that, with social pressure, regulators will, become more flexible. And this would facilitate the research and development, and as a consequence would make it easier to bring products to the patients.
Okay. So let me get a little bit specific here, because I have a real opportunity with the two of you here. Working as I do for Miltenyi Biotec, I spend the majority of my waking life telling people how fantastic all of our products and services are. Mm-hmm. But Miltenyi Biomedicine is a separate legal entity who just so happens to use all of our products and services, right, to get things done. So looking again at the next 5 years, what do you think, or what would you like to see in terms of innovation from Miltenyi Biotec? What can we do that's going to help to prepare for where the industry is going?
Oh, that's a good question. Biotech, they play an essential role, for example, in providing us the lentivirus and manufacturing our products. So they are continuously improving their processes. So if they just keep the pace, keep on working on it, always getting better, faster, more efficient. And I see also the communication channels have improved in the last month, so we are much more in contact. So I think this is the good way. I think strengthening our collaboration, we are one Miltenyi at the end, right? So this would facilitate the job from our side, of course, which is to develop the products clinically.
Mm-hmm. I should mention before you continue too, I have arranged for a preemptive pardon from Stefan Miltenyi, just in case you're worried about upsetting him with the answer.
Good to know.
No, and I can probably add there that, as you already mentioned, of course, the manufacturing platform, the processes, I think, as we also said in the very beginning, everybody is looking for cutting cost of goods, so really improving the process also in a way that we reduce hands-on time, that we really have a completely, entirely closed ecosystem with respect to the safety attributes, for instance, as well, that when we can show that also at some point can think about dropping one or the other IPC, so in process control, to really also become faster with our quality analysis, as we also mentioned, speed with the delivery of a fresh product, it will be very interesting to also have shorter microbiological examination, because this is at the moment still takes 7 days to have the final readout. So this is very, very complicated to handle. So there's still a lot of room for improvement when you think about the manufacturing QC part per se, which hopefully then also make it easier to take this process and use it for our pipeline, use it with a different vector, use it for different indications, and then be able to really use it very confident in additional clinical trials which are upcoming from biomedicine side.
Thank you. I think we're coming towards the end of our time, Silvia, so perhaps if you want to wrap a bow on this here quickly, but obviously do feel free to chime in if there are any last thoughts that you would like to put forward, or one thing that you want anyone watching to go away remembering about this talk, then feel free to add that in too.
It's your time. Otherwise, I can tell a bit about my takeaways from today, right? So cell and gene therapy is far more than just manufacturing and analytics. So we were discussing this in the last episode. And especially if we are working towards commercial settings, the operational aspect, the QA aspects become more and more important. They're an integral part of it. And it's a highly interdisciplinary approach in the development, but then also in later, more mature phases. And this is absolutely important to tackle maybe the most difficult thing, which is that one process is one batch, right? You said this so nicely, Vicente. I mean, we cannot change that. It's given by the way how we manufacture from an autologous source. So now we have to cope with that. We will do this to increase automation, integration, digitalization, maybe robotics and AI. But this has to go like hand in hand, not just within the manufacturing piece, also if it comes to QA pieces or supply chain pieces. It had to be thought together as one manufacturing process. So as we did as one Miltenyi here, right? Mm-hmm. And I think therefore we need a very collaborative environment. Otherwise it's tricky. It's not just ticking a box, the QA box, the supply chain box. It's really intertwined. And that makes things unique. And then one really important thing, right, Vicente, that you said, we had one arm trial so far. Now this is going to change. We somehow have to deal with that. Maybe in vivo is an alternative. I think ex vivo will also prevail in certain conditions. So we have to understand what we have to do to still make that happen, right? And if decentralized or point of care manufacturing can happen, can help, I cannot say right now. We need maybe more subject matter experts on that. But to me, it seems like a very promising avenue to really get these medicines closer to the patient and make sure that we solve this riddle as we have it right now. So having said that, James, you have always the one who has the last word. So
the last word is not original, I'm afraid. It says what I say to all of our guests on the show, which is just thank you again very much for your time. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I know that we've taken you away from a lot more important work than just satisfying our curiosity. So yes, really appreciate that, and I hope you will like the finished result and you will tune in to watch the rest of our series too.
We certainly will.
Of course. Thank you very much
for having us.
It was a pleasure.